So welcome everyone. My name is Hayley LaPalme, co-director of Nourish, based here in Treaty 13, also known as Toronto, so in Dish with One Spoon territory. We're really glad to have you on today, so thanks so much for joining. And to start us in a good way today, we wanted to invite a longtime friend of Nourish to help us with an opening. So I would like to invite Haida Knowledge Keeper Jenny Cross, who's calling in from Pacific time, it's early out west, to join and offer an opening for us. And Jenny is somebody who's been close to the Nourish program since we started a few years ago with the first cohort. She's supported 2 past innovators in Haida Gwaii and is also a current member of the Nourish Indigenous and Allies Advisory. So Jenny, over to you.
Singat La, everybody. I'd like to offer up a Haida prayer to begin, and then I will do a speech that my late grandfather, the late Chief Skidegate Lewis Conson, did in March of 1966. So if we can all just come together in our thoughts and our minds. Satlana gunanik Hadigas, a Haid Singay Skaudi Dangash Kiltlaga. Wadalchun Anna is this Skaudi Dangash Kiltlaga. A Haid an Gudat Alangisis. A sing it at Tlusting Solana. Ginachan Hoyet Kagai Ilgai Dangat Kananga. It Wadalchan Gitla Dagwia a singista. Skangulhat Alang Kulkas Gutla it Git Kilgat. It Wadalchan Gitla sing Kadanga Ista Salana. How Creator, we thank you for today. Thank you to everyone that is here. Today we're here together. Please be with us, Creator. We ask of you that everything goes well. Give us all strength. Give us help with the work we are doing. Give us all knowledge, Creator. Thank you. And I like to read a speech that my great-grandfather did, and it's used island-wide. People use it as a reference. I'll read the poem. People are like trees, and groups of people are like the forest. While the forests are composed of many different kinds of trees, these trees intertwine their roots so strongly that it is impossible for the strongest winds which blow on our islands to uproot the forest. For each tree strengthening its neighbor, and their roots are inexplicably entwined. In the same way, the people of our islands, composed of members of nations and races from all over the world, are beginning to intertwine their roots so strongly that no troubles will affect them. Just as one tree standing alone would soon be destroyed by the first strong winds which come along, so is it impossible for any person, any family, or any community to stand against the troubles of this world. Lewis Conson, March 1966, Chief Skidegate. So this is a really good speech that he did, and it resonates working together, and that when we work together, we can face any challenges of the world. When we stand alone, it's a little bit more challenging. So good luck to all of you, and it's an honor to be here presenting this Haida prayer and the speech to you, Hawa.
Hawa, Jenny. A good message and a fitting one for the work that we're launching today, the idea of working together rather than working alone. So yeah, Hawa, again, for sharing that Haida opening with us, and something especially that comes from your father. So we really appreciate that. And welcome again.
My grandfather.
Your grandfather, yeah. Thank you, Jenny. So folks who have had the chance to meet Jenny in the past know she's a really wonderful, powerful teacher, a really important person in the cohort at Nourish over the past years, and the kind of person you get to meet when you come into the fold with this community. So we're really grateful to have you here. And yeah, welcome to the other folks who are on the call. So from healthcare, from community, past innovators on the call, folks from Newfoundland, Interior BC, all the way out to the Pacific, policymakers. So we're so grateful to have you here. And today we are launching recruitment for the next 2-year Nourish cohort. And so we're doing this at a wild time. We're in the midst of a global pandemic that's highlighting so many of the vulnerabilities and cracks in our food and health systems. We're seeing high rates of food insecurity, inequitable health outcomes, the persistent reality of systemic racism, and this specter of climate change that we know is affecting our health and our well-being, but we don't really quite know how to address it. So the writer Thomas Berry, who wrote The Great Work, he says, the great work now is to carry out the transition of the earth to a period when humans would be present on the planet in a mutually beneficial manner. And I think that's why many of us are here today, to do that work of transitioning to a way of living and working that aligns patient and planetary health. So rather than games of whack-a-mole and keeping up and burning out, we're looking for new ways to more sustainably take on the challenge of rising to these calls of our time, ways that benefit care providers, community, and ecosystems alike. So today we're beginning the 6-month recruitment process to find the next cohort that wants to go on this journey with us. Something like Jenny's grandfather said, the idea of traveling together, working together rather than alone. So if you're asking yourself if you should be here, the answer is yes, because the answer often with Nourish is yes. And today it's yes for a couple of reasons. Yes, because the rising call of the day is going to take health, food, and community leaders from across the system to take on. We're going to be talking today about building collaborative teams and collaborative approaches to take on big problems. And so whether you're a food service lead, you're a policymaker, a physician, a member of a green team at a hospital, an advocate in your community, you're the kind of person who we want to be seeing and is essential in these collaboratives so that we can genuinely be taking on these big problems. And yes, for a second reason, which is that we have some really wonderful, inclusive, COVID-sized programming planned for the recruitment phase. So that's going to be valuable to folks. You're going to have the opportunity to participate in Nourish programming, regardless about whether you know you're ready today or your organization or your partners are ready today to commit to applying to the final cohort. You'll be able to benefit from this programming over the next 6 months that's going to be offered prior to the selection and announcement of the cohort in April. So we have lots to share with you. And as we get into it, I just want to remind yourselves, it's really great seeing all of your what food means to you in the chat. So if you haven't done that yet, please share it there. And then again, use the 3 dots that are hovering just above the image with your name to share with us where you're joining from. And part of the goal is we want folks to be able to see. We'll stop sharing screens at some point so you can see each other and get a sense of where people are calling in from. So the agenda for today, we're going to go through some background and context about the program and talking specifically about how we got here and what the program is. And then we're going to be joined by 2 guest speakers. So we'll have Kelly Gordon, who's a past innovator and a current member of the Indigenous and Allies Advisory, along with Jenny, speaking. And then also Dr. Andrew Bazari, who's the Executive Director of Population Health and Social Medicine at the University Health Network in Toronto. We're also going to go through some of what those capacity building webinars are that I spoke to you about, what the application process is for the cohort, how planning grants work, and talking through some key dates and milestones. We'll have a couple touch points along the way to pause and have a bit of discussion, ask some questions. And so that's our plan to go until 1:30 Eastern time. So we have 90 minutes together. And at the conclusion of the webinar, we are going to send you a survey that's a follow-up. And it's not, did you like this webinar? But it's really a survey that gets a bit of a pulse check about where you're at, what kind of supports you might be interested in to support you to build a team in your community, or maybe some matchmaking support to help you find other folks in your region who might be interested. So we'll ask you to fill that out at the end. And we'll also be sharing the recording of the webinar, slides, and also a very dazzling recruitment package that our team has been working on. So let's meet that team. So you've heard from me. I would love to introduce and have these guys introduce themselves. Let's start with my co-director, Jen Reynolds.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Jen Reynolds, based in Montreal, living and working on unceded Mohawk territory. And I'm bringing over 2 decades of work on community food security, food systems, and policy to the Nourish team, and really excited about the potential to be fostering, leading systemic change with all of you in the coming years.
Hi, everybody. My name is Robin Speedy. I'm located on the unceded territory of the Hunkaminam and Snohomish-speaking peoples, also known as Burnaby, British Columbia. Really excited to be here with you today. I joined Nourish recently from the health lab at Nesta, based in London, UK, where I was working to support the health system with place-based change using the 100-day challenge methodology. So I'm really excited to see how we can apply some of that and learn from each other through the Nourish cohort. Welcome.
Ane Bojo, Mair Greenfield Dijnakas, Giwe no Nquen Donjba, Kebwak First Nation Donjba, Giwe no Nquen Endayong. Hello, my name is Mair Greenfield. I'm from North Bay, Ontario. My family's from Kebwak First Nation, and I'm in North Bay, Ontario right now, Robinson Huron Treaty and Nipissing First Nation territory. Really happy to be here. I'm joining with a bit of a technology background and service learning, working with Indigenous communities for over 15 years now. Very happy to be here with Food as Medicine. Chmigwich.
And then we also have 2 guest speakers. So you two, Kelly and Andrew, I invite you to chime in and say hi now, or you can give us a wave and wait till later. There's a smile. Hello. All right, we'll hang on until later. We're looking forward to hearing from both of you. Okay, so today, just to contextualize this a little bit, Nourish does all kinds of things. And so we're doing work around communications, trying to share out the really amazing work over the last few years of the innovators. So writing blogs, there has been stories in the media, also doing work that's around convening policymakers and sharing the work and looking for alignment between their provinces and territories. We also are planning to launch campaigns later this year and in 2021 related to planetary health and Indigenous foodways. So there's a whole ecosystem of work that's going on around us. And today we're really here to talk about what is at the heart of it, which is these Anchor Collaborative cohorts that we're recruiting. So today we're talking about recruitment that's happening for the 2021-2022 cohort, but just so you know, we are planning to recruit a second cohort 2 years from now that will build on the work of this cohort, just as this one will be building on the work and learning of the last cohort. So you might recognize them on the next slide if you've been on a webinar in the past. So Nourish supported 25 organizations represented by 26 innovators from across the country who worked on projects to bring food to a more central place in health and healing in their organizations. And through the work that they did, they were able to impact organizational and provincial and territorial policy, make connections in systems they hadn't seen before, influence shifts in markets, and really take on big collaborative national projects to address some of the more stuck aspects that keep food and health systems locked in the places that they are now. So we're really working to build on the past that these 26 people helped to open up. And really hoping to build on the momentum that they helped to establish that really is recognizing the power of food as something that's fundamental to well-being. So over the years, you probably read one of these stories that popped up in the paper. A lot of the innovators were on the news, making whether it was radio or in print, but sharing their work out there. And it's work with a lot of complexity. And so on the next slide, you can see an image of something we call our map of problems. And it basically looks at the ways that a whole bunch of the issues that many of you are tackling, how they're all interconnected. And at the outside of this whole map of problems that looks at how health inequity is connected to an overburdened health system and how that's connected to household food insecurity and a climate crisis, we see around the periphery of this image thought bubbles. And these really represent some of the dominant ways that we think about food that we're looking to overcome. So seeing food just as a cost center, rather than understanding its value, seeing it as a commodity, as a commodity or just as nutrients, or seeing it as ancillary to care. The innovators' work really showed how by overcoming some of these stuck dominant narratives that many of you probably hear in the halls of your organizations, we're able to advance work that really brings food more powerfully to that place where it can support health and healing. So we think this is especially important to do now as the climate crisis is highlighting and exacerbating issues like food insecurity and health inequity. And I think the words of the President Emeritus of the McConnell Foundation on the next slide really helps to highlight kind of the place that we are in now. And so Stephen Hutter says, we're in a triple crisis, a health crisis, an environmental crisis, and an economic crisis. In such a complex situation, it is important to start somewhere, building pathways to possibility as we move forward. The rest speaks nicely about Nourish. Maybe that part's funny to read, but I think this quote really gets at some of the complexity that we have going on right now. And so this is the environment that we feel really excited to be launching the Anchor program into, so that we can be supporting progressive organizations and partners to come together to really tackle these issues that we're facing in earnest and with an understanding of the ways that these problems are interconnected. So I'm going to pass it over now to Jen to take us into that program a bit.
And so building on this idea, we're using the term anchor leadership to really try to convey this idea of harnessing the long-term presence, mission, and resources of healthcare. So there's a stylized tree there, and coming back to Jenny's comments of how we can be a forest and ecosystem working together to address these big issues of the day. And we see that healthcare leadership can build upon the platform of the patient tray, look at its food environments that it's offering to visitors and staff, consider more deeply the food access in communities and out into the food systems that feed us all, how we need those to be resilient and our diets to be healthy and reflecting our cultures. And we need to have all of these elements woven together to impact these big challenges, as Hayley had mentioned on a previous slide. And we really see the importance of having partnership to be anchoring this work of food for health and a movement across these big systems. So our impact areas are big and broad. We are seeking to impact equity and community well-being and climate with this work. We're looking to co-solve for issues in both our food and healthcare systems. Food is a key social determinant of health, but it's often overlooked. It's an essential part of culture, and it is a powerful intervention point in the fight against climate change. And our vision is encapsulated in this framework. So we've put together this idea of 6 levers to try and scaffold this big, bold change we're hoping to work on with all of you. And the idea of a lever is it's a change, a strategic change in one small part of a system that can impact the entire system. And we see the opportunity here, I'll read them, of 6 levers that are interconnected. So for healthcare to bring food into a more central place. So understanding food as medicine, improving the patient and staff food experience, building planetary health leadership, promoting planetary health menus, advancing sustainable purchasing with the $4 billion that's spent on Canadian health services every year, and creating healthcare food hubs. We have so many untapped resources that we could better leverage for people and planet. So here's another map, getting a little more complex, that shows a number of actions that can be starting points for activating these levers. So this includes how we can harness the menus, the purchasing, and the clinical pathways, the leadership of healthcare with communities towards these impacts that we want to have. So the actions here are mapped out, and a little bit later, we're going to use these as a scaffolding to spark the idea of how starting at one point in one part of this system can lead to powerful pathways to transition to change.
So I'm really excited to share a little bit more about the Anchor Collaborative Cohort as well. And we thought we should start by describing what we mean by the Anchor Collaborative Cohort. So Anchor Collaboratives in our eyes are diverse healthcare and community teams that are coming together over 2 years to tackle the interconnected challenges that we've been talking about today. So the things like health inequity, food insecurity, climate change, climbing rates of diet-related illness. And Nourish will be supporting teams to experiment with solutions to these complex challenges over the next 5 years. And we're starting on this journey now by bringing together 2 cohorts of place-based teams. So the first one will take place between 2021 and 23, and the second from 2023 to 24. And we're launching the recruitment for the program now, with the cohort beginning in June of next year. So we've divided this work into 2 phases because we feel it's really important to support teams in the process of getting ready for the cohort to set you up for success. So the first phase, and Jen, maybe if you can just advance to the next slide, that'd be good. Great, thank you, is taking kind of a capacity building approach to the recruitment, where we're not just asking you to submit an application, but we actually want to support you in understanding the kinds of problems that you might address through this work and help you grow some knowledge and skills to respond to them effectively. So Hayley will be talking about the capacity building and learning opportunities in a bit more detail later, but for now, the key thing to know is that we're designing the recruitment to add value for anyone that participates in that process, regardless of whether you decide to submit a full application to the program. So in late spring of next year, a committee will be reviewing all of the applications received, and the cohort will be selected and announced prior to kicking off with a virtual retreat in June. And for the cohort phase, programming will involve 5 teams that are learning and experimenting together over the course of the 2 years using a cohort model. So local collaboratives will exchange with peers nationally to deepen your understanding of how to achieve systems change by leveraging the power of food for improved planetary health. So the cohort will participate in things like virtual retreats and regular meetings with coaching and mentorship support from Nourish and our wide network of advisors. So for teams that are looking to move forward as part of the cohort, there are 2 steps that will be involved. The first is submitting an expression of interest, and the second is submitting a full application. So we're looking for you to develop an expression of interest so that you can start to convene your team and think through the possibilities together. And we believe that this collaborative approach early on, while you begin to form your team, will set you up for greater success should you be selected for the cohort. So will also give us a chance to get to know you better, and the vice versa, so that we can kind of help you through the process and think through how to develop a strong application. And all the teams that submit an expression of interest will receive feedback from Nourish to help you strengthen your full application should you decide to submit one. So let's talk about who we're looking to engage in the Anchor Collaboratives. You might be wondering who can submit an application. Nourish's approach is firmly rooted in bringing a diversity of perspectives together to create something that's unique and stronger than just the sum of its parts individually. And we've learned from previous work that the collective insights of multi-stakeholder teams help us to see the system more fully so that we can better identify gaps and weaknesses, as well as a broader range of opportunities. So we're looking to think about how we can shift power dynamics and support participating teams to create new possibilities together. And we know that we can't do that by working alone. So the first step of the recruitment process is to develop an expression of interest, as I've said. And at this stage, we're looking for teams to identify 2 main partners. One is a healthcare lead organization, which we're calling the Anchor Institution. And the second is a community organization working in close partnership with healthcare. So we believe it's important to have these two kinds of organizations working together because you'll have the ability to anchor well-being in your communities more sustainably than if you work independently. So established health organizations with a food service like hospitals or long-term care can work within and beyond their institutions' walls to make a significant difference. And this impact can be multiplied even further by a strong community-based partner like a food organization, Indigenous organization, climate or environmental group, or many others. But we know that healthcare has a huge annual food spend, and so we really have an opportunity to move the needle if we can make food in healthcare settings more delicious, culturally appropriate, environmentally sustainable, and appealing to patients and families, which can also help to reduce food waste. So it's for these reasons that we're looking for a healthcare organization to anchor the work, and we're asking them to demonstrate their commitment as well by providing a 0.5 FTE of resource support to help coordinate the collaborative activities locally. And once you've submitted your expression of interest, so this part comes a little bit later with your two primary partners, then we'll support you to develop your broader team. So over the latter part of the recruitment period, we'll explore effective ways of engaging a wide range of system stakeholders, from clinicians and food procurement teams and leadership teams within healthcare to local farmers and food suppliers and other community partners with a stake in the issues that you're looking to collectively address. So all of the details of who is eligible to apply can be found in the recruitment package. But to start, you really just need to know that we're looking for one health organization with a food service and one community partner. And then lastly, just before I hand it back over to Hayley to introduce some of the examples that we could see taking place, this is just a timeline of some of the key dates, and we'll come back to this slide a few times throughout the webinar, just to give you a sense of the phasing of the recruitment period leading up to the launch of the cohort in June of next year. So I think with that, Hayley, I'll pass it back to you.
Great, sounds good. Thanks, Robin. So by now, some of you are probably asking, like, okay, so what are these collaborative teams coming together around to do? And to start, I want to share that it's not projects. We're not asking you to come on with projects. We're asking you to come on with problems that you want to solve and a vision for the future. So in our past innovator cohort, when they were selected, they didn't have projects either, but they had this image of what food and health could mean when they worked together in their areas. And so we're going to be looking for something similar this time. And we're going to show you how you can play a little bit with the Nourish Food for Health levers that got published in our last newsletter, just to give you some ideas of how you can be doing that. But in the expression of interest phase, again, we're really just looking for you to come at us with some ideas about a problem you see happening in your organization or your community that you might want to tackle. So we're going to just riff through a few examples to show you what it might be. And I want to invite you to just pick up a pen and paper and be jotting down some of your own ideas, because we're really thinking, like, what unsolvable stuck problems are you noticing that are related to food and health in your community? So a first one might be a racialized community with high rates of diabetes, and that they're facing persistent challenges around access to fresh and healthy food. So this community decides that it's time to take an upstream approach and address the social determinants of health creating this reality. It's no longer enough to be prescribing solutions to patients. We really need to be getting to them earlier before they become patients. So understanding the power of food as medicine, a community health center and a hospital partner with a local urban farm to pilot a fresh food prescription program. And it supports community members with locally produced fresh fruit and vegetables and with traditional plant medicine programming. So when they do this project, they track early improvements to food security, health and well-being, and fewer emergency room visits. And so over the course of the project, they meander through these levers, exploring different things, and food insecurity screening becomes a standard practice. And clinicians in the community lead the start of a weekly on-site farmers market and hospital sourcing for patient and cafeteria menus. So there's one. Here are two more.
Okay, so I have an example that explores a different pathway, and this one looks at how planetary health leadership is activated through community and climate organizations. So the problem here is recent flooding attributed to climate change spurs a regional health authority to consider where it can act to mitigate climate impacts locally and globally. So patient advisors and senior leaders begin participating in a climate action coalition and identify that they can support farmers implementing sustainable grazing practices, which will significantly improve the local watershed's holding capacity by leveraging their food purchasing. So in addition, building relationships with First Nations to learn more about stewardship of the land can help to lead to greater commitments for action toward reconciliation as well. So elders are engaged to advise on the development of traditional food menus, and healthcare professionals are invited for land-based convenings to learn more. So some of the food for health levers that this example might touch on are planetary health leadership, Indigenous foodways, values-based procurement, and sustainable ingredients.
And another example for one of these Anchor Collaborative teams could be to tackle the rising issue of antibiotic resistance, which is leading to higher medical costs, prolonged hospital stays, and increased mortality, and really strong predictions for the impact it will have on global health. So in this scenario, a health authority could start to focus on less meat and better meat. So to support the reduced use of antibiotics, they could change their menu and take that cost savings from reducing meat on the menu and investing it in more sustainable meat produced without antibiotics, and also identify regional Indigenous harvesters of fish. And bringing these planetary and culturally appropriate menus into their healthcare facilities would improve patient uptake and intake and reduce food waste costs. And all of these changes could ripple through an institution and change its views about the importance of health and about how buildings and the resources that a hospital has could be used differently. So the planned build for a new hospital, regional hospital, were changed and adapted to expand and have on-site composting, and also an economic driver, a food hub for the Indigenous harvesters to have a place for distribution of their products to visitors, staff, the community, and local restaurants. So we've just brought these in as some examples, 3 ways you could consider what the pathway an Anchor Collaborative team might find its journey to take them from one starting point, one of these action points, and expanding into many of the other interconnected levers and actions. So again, to give you a tangible sense of what the cohort could be like and what the impact would be of being part of it, we wanted to just sort of bring you back to some of the experiences we had with the previous cohort that Hayley mentioned and some of the benefits that they shared with us of the participation in it. So I think fundamentally being in a cohort is a powerful way to build new relationships. It helps individuals to develop their capacities as leaders, to learn more about systems, and it de-risks innovation. Peers can come together to share their challenges and their successes. The Nourish team and advisors and partners will be an ecosystem to support learning through mentorship and coaching of teams that participate in the cohort. And recently, one of our advisors, Amy Ma, who's the co-chair of the Montreal Children's Hospital Family Advisory Forum, she shared with us what she thought was the spark, what resonated for her in the potential of these teams. And her vision, and I think we share it as well, is the opportunity for legacies of communities for building back better in the pandemic. It spotlighted all of these deep cracks in our systems and how we need to come together to address them. We also see the opportunity for teams in the cohort to be steeped in opportunities for learning about innovation and education and practice. Going to be exposed, as you will, as many of you will in the recruitment phase, to exciting ideas about transition design, about how to solve wicked problems, coming at it from different views, not jumping to solutions, but thinking about the problem first. Inclusive as well of Western and Indigenous frameworks for how do we innovate in these complicated systems that we're trying to change. And across Canada, there is amazing food for health work happening. And participating in the cohort, we think, will help to deepen that impact locally. And Nourish's work and opportunity is to be sharing that with a broader audience, with policymakers, with the public, with other stakeholders and healthcare leaders and community leaders. So rather than being an add-on to existing work, we hope that participating in the cohort is a way to further align mission mandate of healthcare institutions to be promoting health. And to just come back concretely again to the resourcing being offered to the cohort. So participating in the programming around the cohort activities is part of that package. So all of the cohort programming will be covered by Nourish and its core funding partners, the McConnell Foundation and the Arrow Family Foundation. And during the recruitment phase, we're going to give you a bit more of details. We've mentioned it a bit, but we will be offering 15 small $5,000 planning grants. And in place of a commitment fee for participating in the cohort, as we've mentioned already, we're going to be asking teams to be doing the work to prepare in their full application for the resourcing of a half-time Anchor Collaborative Cohort coordinator, Anchor Program coordinator in their communities to be holding that place-based team together and liaising with the Nourish team. So I'll hand it over to Hayley, I think, to lead us into, I'm sure you have a lot of questions for us.
All right, great. Okay, so yeah, time for questions. So you can ask questions two ways. You can chat them into the chat box, or you can raise your hand and then we can give you speaking privileges. Obviously, you're noticing we didn't anticipate some things with our Zoom ability, for example, like you couldn't update your name. So sorry about that, but great to see people just chatting them in. And we don't need you to unmute yourself, but just raise your hand and then we can take questions that way. So I think we're just gonna give you a minute to reflect on anything that might be coming up. Okay. So we have one question that says, what's the difference between a project and solving a problem? So this is a great question. So as you've heard and as you've seen the program be named, we're really looking at collaborative approaches for this new work. The reason for that is because different people sitting in with different social locations, whether those are personal identity things, the roles that they hold, how they move through the world, who employs them, they see situations differently. So the cause of someone's recurring visits to an ER might have a different kind of, people, depending where they sit in the system, might understand that differently, why that's happening. And so we're not looking for projects because we don't want to see individual organizations or even coalitions of people coming together to quickly frame a solution to something and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Instead, we want groups of people coming together really intentionally to sit with the problem, to really hear each other, to go through some of the capacity building exercises that we'll be offering everyone for free, to really understand what's at the root of that issue rather than coming up with a Band-Aid problem. So not that folks don't come up with good project ideas. And in fact, often communities have already been working together for a long time and do have an idea of what they want to do. That's great. It's just not going to be what the difference is between making the cohort or not making the cohort. If you have a really good idea of what you want to do in your community and you've arrived at it in a really collaborative way, then we're just asking you to share your thinking around that with us. So again, it's about really focusing on the quality of the process to eventually arrive at a project, because the Anchor Collaborative Cohort will be doing work together, not just philosophizing like, why did this happen? But we're just not starting with that. Does anyone else on my team want to chime in about that one? All right. All right, so hopefully that answers that one. Kavanaugh asks, can the person who is applying for the grant also be the 0.5 FTE for the healthcare org? Yeah, I don't see why not. We're really looking for thoughtful uses of these planning grants that are really meant to enable participation from across the system in the planning grant process. So we never have been prescriptive in our programming. We really let, whether it's the past innovators or the new members of this cohort, tell us what's needed. You know your communities best. And so the organization that's applying for the grant could also be the organization that's providing the 0.5 FTE. Sure. I think the one thing we would flag is we're really, again, looking for this to enable organizations that might not otherwise be able to participate to be participating. So I think Robin mentioned some things, some uses of it, but absolutely it could be. Ultimately though, the resourcing for the 0.5 FTE or part-time person, that's a 2-year role. That's a role that's going to have to resourced in a way that the organizations who are funding it really have some skin in the game. And we're going to be encouraging folks to lean into the roles and funding that might be possible through their healthcare organizations. Not that it has to come from there, but I think we're looking a little bit to equal the playing field with both the offering of the planning grants and the ask for the 0.5 FTE. Feel free also, folks, to raise your hands so that you can ask these questions so that you don't have to get tired of hearing my voice. Joseph LeBlanc in Sudbury asked, what's the length of these initiatives? Is it multi-year, and will the 2 cohorts have time to interact? That's a great question. So both cohorts will be approximately 2 years. We haven't set in stone the timing of the second cohort that will be recruited under the Anchor Collaborative Program banner, but definitely they'll have opportunities to interact, including their innovators from the past cohort. We're planning for them to have roles as mentors, advisors, folks to learn from. And so the idea is we're always building on the work of the cohorts before the new one, and when those like innovators, pathfinders that are really helping to carve out the way. All right. Jen and Robin or Mair, do you want to chime in on any of these? Do you want to pick one from the chat?
I was just going to say, Hayley, as well, that if we don't get to all the questions, I'm trying to respond so that you've got kind of a written record of some of the responses as well here. And we will be circulating an FAQ afterwards so that you have a copy of all the questions that were asked throughout the webinar, as well as some of the answers and guidance on those questions. So if you don't catch it all right now, don't worry, there will be a follow-up with it.
Okay, great. I think I have 4 more minutes to go through some of these, so let's see what we can get through. So what are the variety of healthcare organizations that we're looking to lead as the anchor? So hospitals, community health centers, public health authority, schools or nursing schools or schools of medicine. I mean, I think you could make the case to us. What we've published officially is hospitals, health authorities, community health centers, long-term care, indigenous health services. Could there be a school of nursing or medicine? Maybe. I think if you can make the case to us, and that'd be something we would be happy to chat out with one-on-one. We are absolutely open to kind of like novel combinations. We are looking for a health organization and community. So it's kind of to get the perspective out and beyond hospital walls and into the community a bit more. But these are things we have flexibility around. I would just flag, we do want to see a food service operation in the lead health organization, but these are things we can chat about. Because if you have other members of your coalition or your collaborative that you're trying to get in there, that could maybe work. So resourcing, let's see.
Yeah, Stephanie is wondering if there's any additional funding from Nourish for the work after the $5,000 grants.
Mm-hmm. So Jen went over some of the resourcing that comes. And so Nourish is not primarily a granting program. So Nourish is really a community of practice, a lab, a leadership program that is going to, I don't know if you want to throw up that slide again, Jen, maybe that's not the right word to use. You want to go back to that one. But a lot of the value in the programming is from the previous slide, actually. So it's things like the network, the opportunities for learning, the opportunities to be engaging in policy conversations, to have support and kind of like more intangible support for the work that you're doing, whether it's connection to mentors, advisors, communication support, that sort of thing. But what we will actually be doing for the full application phase is inviting teams that have already moved past the EOI phase to be looking for partners in their community that could potentially fund the work itself further. So these would be things like getting engagement from hospital foundations, from community foundations or other philanthropic organizations. And so Nourish will be supporting the 5 teams to do that. But the resourcing of the 0.5 FTE does need to come from one of the 2 leading organizations.
And I would just add, I mean, I think we see once the cohort is established, really high potential of, doing some support of fundraising for the cohort across Canada, because it will be really leading innovation, and there's lots of potential to tap into, and again, align with other mandates, the shifts toward agricultural sustainability, how to better meet basic needs of racialized communities. So we do see this high potential to really be leveraging participation in the cohort and helping the teams when they are finding their paths to be helping to find additional resources, as Hayley mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Great. So the planning grant, again, it can be used for what your early partners think is most essential to support you to build your team over the next 6 months. So if that means you need to be offering honorariums to folks, you need to hire a facilitator or a coordinator to help organize you, you can do that. If you want to be engaging elders in your community, you want to pay them honorariums, you can do that. If you need to pay for childcare of families who you want to have engaged in the community, you can do that. Really, we're just looking for thoughtful applications of it that are going to enable participations of folks that might not otherwise be part of it. So, we don't want to see a big urban hospital telling us that they need to pay $5,000 to a manager that already has a role to fill out that budget line item. Not something like that, but there is a lot of flexibility. Or I mean, you could say that, and you could see how it stands up next to the other planning grant applications, but there is a lot of flexibility in what it looks like. Okay, maybe one more. There was a question about kind of like who could be, whether specific populations could be the target of an intervention. I think absolutely, whether it's like children or the elderly, something related to COVID and long-term care, if you want to come together around that and say, okay, we want to take on this issue as a group, you absolutely could. And you're not limited in your partnerships for the community partner to specifically food organizations, but you could have climate organizations, Indigenous health organizations, other service organizations be part of it. The goal really is just to really be building more expansive collaboratives that can see the system from different places. So I think those are the questions we can get to now, but we have another Q&A coming up. So we'll save them. And as Robin mentioned, we are going to put together an FAQ. And you're also going to get the recruitment package that answers a lot of these things. But now I have the pleasure of inviting 2 of Nourish's advisors, really wonderful people. Kelly, as a past innovator to the program, who's a community dietitian from 6 Nations of the Grand River, and Dr. Andrew Zari, who's also here where I live in Toronto at UHN, and who is really championing work nationally around social determinants of health, to chime in a bit on the program, their experience, and where they see this kind of work going. So Kelly, I think we're starting with you, and thank you both so much for coming on today.
Sego Seguego, Yongets Gotwindio Ganigeha. Hi everyone, my Mohawk name is Gotwindio and my English name is Kelly Gordon. As Hayley said, I'm a registered dietitian currently supporting the community of Six Nations of the Grand River as a manager of health promotions. And I'd just first like to say hawa to Jenny Cross for sharing her prayer and her teachings this morning. It's always a pleasure to hear Jenny speak, and I always learn so much from her, and it sets such a wonderful rooting or grounding as we join in together for this discussion and conversation today. And having Jenny been a part of Nourish for the past couple of years, I feel really honored and privileged to share the space with her. I'd also like to say nyawa and thank you to the Nourish team just for the invitation today to talk about the Anchor Collaborative and hopefully offer some shares from my journey through the last 3 years of Nourish, and also offer some inspiration to those of you considering applying to the Anchor Collaborative, and hopefully can help answer some questions as well. So I'll let Andrew introduce himself and then we'll dive in a little bit.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Just coming off mute. My name is Andrew, and thanks so much to the Nourish team for inviting me to be able to share some reflections, and has been such a privilege to work with Hayley and Jen to the last stretch, and so many of you who are in the room, and especially to I've gotten a chance to meet Kelly and get to learn from her in person, and now to be able to share some insights virtually. So just very appreciative.
Great, thanks, Andrew. So as I mentioned, I'm a dietitian and was originally approached in the fall of 2016 by Nourish, by Hayley and Beth Hunter, and they had outreach to Six Nations of the Grand River, Six Nations Health Services specifically, and wondering if we wanted to be a part of Nourish, right? So we had just started learning about what Nourish was, and we're a little skeptical because you worry about time and like how much time is this going to take, and it's always sometimes about, not always, it's sometimes about the gives and the gets, right? So what are we going to be able to provide to this cohort? And also, what are we going to be able to receive? How is it reciprocal? And truthfully, like I said, we moved into it with a bit of skepticism, but are so thankful that we as an organization, Six Nations Health Services, and me as an individual, as the innovator that was representing the organization, join Nourish, because the impact was tremendous, not only professionally for our community, but also personally. And I think that Jen and Hayley have all shared points this morning around, or this afternoon, I know we're all in different time zones, points on how this helps to build capacity and build connection and strengthen relationships. And I'm just so proud to say I'm a part of Nourish because our Indigenous voice has become embedded within the programming, the launching of the Anchor Collaborative, and I'm so excited to see that. And it's unique, and it's innovative, and it's needed, and it's our responsibility to have that there. So really excited to see everything coming together and how we're moving forward. And we'll share a bit more about the impact and specifically some of the things that we've learned at Six Nations Health Services over the last 3 years being a part of it. So I'll let you share a little bit too on some of your insight and just your experience with, becoming involved in Nourish over the last couple of years.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kelly. And I think, I wouldn't say I had the same level of skepticism, though I probably should have. I'm just joking, Hayley. But I do think it has been, only to, really highlight, I think some of the things that you've mentioned are just, so powerful and resonate on things, especially your point about how innovative it's been. And I actually tend to have my own skepticism about innovation and what we're talking about in public health and healthcare about innovation. And I think we always think about apps or virtual care piece. But I've really been so moved and have learned so much from so many over the last year and a half or so in this space about innovation, of thinking about food differently, the process. And I think that one of those opening slides on the complexity of the food chain, but intersection with health inequities and the politics and purchasing and procurement and climate change, and how complex all of this is on something that seems so straightforward from a hospital perspective. And I apologize to Bill's mention of I'm a primary care physician with Inner City Health Associates, but also get to work at UHN in social medicine and population health, and seeing the push that Nourish has done in a way that's really authentic of bringing people together from community and hospital and different spaces to come up with innovative solutions for things that have long eluded us, I think is really something that I've been really grateful for, and being part of the network where there's been that learning. And I think we have a lot to learn as hospitals and to continue to learn from our community partners and community leadership on these issues around food and health inequities. And I think one of the things that we've been able to see, and I think for people who are listening in and thinking about whether or not to apply and what the cohort can look like, there really is such support to work through an idea and a challenge, and to help may not make connections, but I think allow those things to foster in ways that are authentic. And I think one of the things we've been able to speak to and again learn from is the connection with one of our community partners with Food Share through the experience, and a huge amount of kudos and respect for Paul Taylor and Leslie Campbell and their team that we've been able through the last few months and through the pandemic especially, thinking around how we can better partner on addressing some of the food insecurity challenges, and especially as we've known has happened for our BIPOC communities through COVID, and how COVID has exacerbated not only poverty and homelessness, but food insecurity, and this divide being something that we are all quite worried about and is top of mind of coming out of the pandemic, that this doesn't actually worsen for certain communities that have long been neglected from the policies we need. So really just grateful for the richness and the wisdom of the relationships that have been here over the last stretch, and looking forward to the discussion and other opportunities about how we can better work together.
And I wanted to share an image, and Hayley, was it able to get into this presentation? So this is an image, and the story I received about this piece of corn that was harvested this fall. And interestingly, there was several corn that looked like this from different fields in our community this fall. And I've never seen anything like it before. And the teaching, or the story I heard, and many different families have different stories and different teachings from our culture, from our Haudenosaunee culture. But they say when the corn is planted, an old spirit is with them helping. The corn gets braided for the old spirit to be set at the top of the stalk. It's a new beginning. To find one is great. To find lots is something special. And I think being in a global pandemic, the impact is severe and it's tremendous. And as healthcare providers, many of you on the call, I'm sure you're tired. And one of the conversations we've had at this table is why now? Like, why are we launching this during the pandemic? Like, we're busy, we're tired, we don't have time. But this offered me, and we gain those teachings from the earth and from our surroundings, right? And when I saw this, it offered that hope. It offered that opportunity. When we look to new beginnings, new opportunities, as Andrew just mentioned, that the disparities are greater than they've ever been in many of our communities. So now is the time. Now is the time to look at, that connector between food and healthcare, and how our organizations can come together, and the power of that opportunity of togetherness, just like Jenny spoke of in her opening this morning around, as we come together, the strength is so much more. So, I share this with all of you today, thinking about that opportunity of it's a new beginning, right? As we move into 2021, we don't know what it's going to look like, but I feel hope, and I feel excitement, and I feel the role food can play in all of this is so large, right? I think food is such a great caveat for these dialogues, these opportunities, these movements, and it's a lever, really, essentially, right? When we look at all of the kind of, when we look at those complex drawings and the systems maps, food is present, and food helps to propel us to address the challenges that we're facing in many of our organizations. And I liked when Jen said, it's not about jumping to solutions. And I think with one of our biggest learnings, or my biggest learnings with Nourish was, with the traditional food program team, we were looking at increasing access to traditional food in healthcare settings. And our initial jump was to look for solutions, but we scaled way back. And as those of us around the table came together representing hospital, community, municipality, government, all different sectors, we were able to really dissect it and look at increasing awareness, looking at creating an understanding, building capacity, all of those important things to really answer that question as to why this is important. And that was one of the biggest learnings and takeaways from this. And within our community of Six Nations, it's really allowed us to dig deeper into what the work is we need to do in our community. So it offered so many ideas being part of Nourish, collaborations and partnerships, and how that's now directly impacting the food work we're doing in our community is awesome. Like, it's great to see. So I wanted to share that new beginning offering, because I think it's something that I needed to hear, and maybe some of you did as well.
Thank you both. Andrew, were you wanting to say anything else?
No, I just thank you for the image and all the learning from Kelly, and just only saying look forward to when we get through this pandemic to being back in person together again, and just hope everyone is staying safe, and do thank everyone for the invitation again.
Well, thank you both, Andrew and Kelly. It's we're really grateful that you've been around. Kelly as an innovator, Andrew as a partner, and one of the FoodRx grantee recipients working with Food Share, and both of you advising. It's appreciated, and I think as you're speaking, one of the things too that I'm reminded of is just like how everyone has changed when you work in a community of practice by the experience of being there, including the facilitators. I know some of the other innovators are on the call and are probably laughing to themselves because, whether it's like conversations with peers that you never would have expected you had, or some of the exercises we do, or journaling that we ask you to do, I think the goal of the work really is to be working at the level of how we think about how we show up in systems so that we can express them differently. And I've learned so much from both of these two. So yeah, thank you again, really wholeheartedly, Kelly and Andrew. We're glad to have you part of this next leg of the journey. And I'm reminded too of something one of our other advisors said to us. So Kate Mulligan from the Alliance for Healthier Communities, and she said, okay, guys, when teams are applying to this, can they be working on short-term and long-term solutions? Like, what's the level of receptivity of this? Because there's a lot of short-term responses happening in community right now. And the answer is yes. So what our examples earlier with those pathways, what those illuminated is then kind of like long-term thinking about how you start with a problem in the present. It can take you on a journey where you end up somewhere you didn't expect to go. And this is kind of what we're hoping will happen with the cohort. So we invite applications that are coming in with a COVID-sized issue that can expand from there if you've got your sights set on that broader system. So on the next slide, we are going to tell you a little bit about capacity building workshops. And so these are going to be opportunities where you're going to get to work and learn with people from your own prospective teams, and also be in the company of folks like Kelly and Andrew who have been down this path and are looking to really see how they might frame up a problem that they want to take on. And the process basically is through the next 6 months, we're going to be doing a whole series of 5 or 6 online learning opportunities, potentially more, and that these are going to really be there to help teams to develop their expressions of interest and their full applications, really help you to frame your problem so that you're not wondering and or spinning your wheels about what it is we're looking for. So these capacity building workshops are directly relevant to the expression of interest phase, directly relevant to the full application phase, but they're also open and available to any small groups of people who want to come in who are not yet even sure they want to go through that whole process, because we are really trying to develop and train some of these skills around systems thinking and thinking about transition to the health and community sectors, because we think we need new ways of solving some of these big problems that we have and that we're facing. So regardless of whether you know for sure you wanted to apply, we invite you to sign up for these workshops. So yeah, on the next slide, we'll do a bit of a spotlight on the transition design learning series that we're going to be offering. So a group of our advisors and some of our friends, some folks who are on the webinar, helped us prototype some of these workshops that we're going to be offering with Terry Irwin and Gideon Kosoff of the Transition Design Institute at Carnegie Mellon. If you're a big nerd like me, you know that they are leading global thinkers in the great work and how we transition. So we're really thrilled to have them as advisors and programmatic and research partners in Nourish. And so running from January to April, we'll be having a 5-part series of virtual workshops with them, where you'll get to experiment with some groovy virtual tools that help you to map and think in systems and think about transition. And we'll be posting more details about these workshops on our website in the coming weeks. So unless I missed something, we're going to open it back up for some questions, but also some reflections. So I think we've got about, do we have 5 minutes for this one? Is that right, Robin? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So for this one, we want to invite 2 things. One, we want to invite you to share kind of some ideas that are coming up for you. So what are some problems in your organization that you've been trying to confront for a while, or that you think it's time to address, that you think might be an interesting fit for the program, things you see in your community, in your organization, or that you would just like to see a health leader in your community take on. But then also some questions. But before we go into answering any questions, again, I'm just going to give us a minute to think about kind of ideas, problem areas that are coming up for you, and invite you to raise your hand or share in the chat. There's no wrong answers. All right, so feel free to please be chatting those in, and then I'm going to go over to Robin. Robin, do you want to tackle some more of the questions that we have?
Yeah, for sure. So a couple that we didn't get to from the last round, Celia was asking whether they can, well, I guess a question about how creative we can get with the community partners. So she described her setting as a community health center on reserve, but they're a very small community and don't have a lot of social service organizations on reserve. So as a result, the community health center there has carried a lot of the social services themselves. And so they have staff and some funding to resource the work. And they're just wondering more about the flexibility related to the types of organizations that could be involved, particularly in small communities.
Do you want to go for it, Robin?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can. Sorry, Hayley. I thought you were hoping I could highlight some of the questions for you. Yeah, so I mean, I think we understand that every community is different, and there are so many different possibilities of how this work could take shape. And so we've tried to imagine some examples of some of the kinds of organizations and players that we see being involved, but we are really looking to you to kind of help us envision what you could see the possibilities being. So I think we're definitely very flexible flexible in terms of the makeup of the community partner and the health organization. I think one of the key aspects to keep in mind is just that the food service element feels quite important. Food is obviously fundamental to Nourish's work. And so finding a way that you can innovate around food for health and bringing in some of the other impact areas around climate and sustainability, as well as equity. If you can see it, I'm sure there are amazing possibilities, and we'd love to hear about them. So I think it's partly that we'll be looking to you to kind of help illustrate what you see working, and then we'll be really happy to have a conversation with you about how we can help that be successful.
Great. Gary, I think you had a question, so I have enabled your speaking privileges. Go ahead. You might just need to unmute yourself. And I'm also going to unmute Andre Bashis. Hey, nice to see you, Andre. Go ahead. Either of you jump in when you're ready.
Can I jump in now? It's Gary Machin.
Please, Gary, go ahead.
Sorry, I apologize. One of the questions I had, well, the idea I have is to promote the consumption of pulses as an alternative to meat because of its economic, health, and environmental benefits. What I'd like to do, though, is we've started that at one of the community health centers, but what we'd like to do is to start a national campaign to unroll that. So what I'm wondering is are the I guess the letters of or expression of interest, is that just strictly for localized projects, or are you interested in something we might want to do at a provincial or national level?
Great question, Gary. And can you just let me know where you're calling in from, organization and province?
I'm calling from Chigamik. I'm working in affiliation with Chigamik, but I'm spearheading a Canadian CHC climate change initiative. So it would be under the umbrella of that.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much for the question, Gary. So it's a good time for us to underline we are looking for place-based collaborations. And so I guess 2 big points. One, promoting the consumption of pulses as a healthy planet-friendly approach to eating, I think is a really worthwhile and important pathway to be exploring. I think it fits broadly into Nourish's planetary health work. But for the Anchor Collaborative program, we are looking for community-led interventions that are more place-based. And so that brings me to the second point, which is we're really looking for projects that start from a problem area that you want to work on solving, as opposed to starting with a solution. So if you know you want to be working on a campaign at whatever scale it might be, I think we'd ask you to back up and say, okay, who's the population that this is for? Are they part of shaping the solution or the project or the that you're planning to work on? Because we are looking for kind of like co-framed, participatorily framed solutions rather than top-down ones, wherever those might be coming from. So I think that would be just my one, or my guess 2 pieces of feedback there to that one. Really worthwhile work. We'd be happy to talk to you more broadly about Nourish's planetary health campaign work nationally. But for the Anchor Collaboratives, we are looking for community-defined, co-defined problem areas that you want to be working on. And if you do end up in a place where you want to work on something to do with access to pulses, that's great. Okay, I'm going to go over to Andre Vashist. Go ahead, Andre.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hey, Hayley. Hi, Hayley, and hi, team. So I'm with my colleague here, Michael Curry, who introduced himself in the chat box with the London Poverty Research Centre out of London, Ontario. And yeah, we have an Anchor Collaborative kind of set up already in London, inspired by some of the work by the Democracy Collaborative out of the US. And as Mike mentioned, the different stakeholders in the chat box were, universities, healthcare system providers, And we had a meeting with them recently to talk about leakage and localization analysis, just analyze the data. Like, how do we even talk about this without even knowing the information of what we're talking about, right? And we kind of got pushed back. Well, we're not sure. We got money from the government. We're not sure if we can share this data with you. We need to look at the legislation. Like, so that's our first hurdle in just the relationship building process. So we can't even, and for us, the data analysis was the first layer of just doing the work before we even get into like a project, like a procurement pilot, if you will, and we had to take a step back from even saying, hey, let's prepare ourselves for an analysis, because there's some concerns around access to the data. How do we share data? What data is available? So I just wanted to share that as a problem area that we're noticing in our community. And as you think about, the organizations that you want to work with in terms of readiness, that's kind of where we're at. And so we're not even sure if food is going to be the main thing they want to work on, although they did already mention that it's a very discrete and understandable part of their procurement process that they are very familiar with. And that could be a good starting point. We just haven't got to that point yet with them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, great. I think without getting too much into it, and I would just say, I think this is what we're hoping the capacity building workshop phase and broader recruitment phase of this work is for, so that we can be giving teams the time and space to kind of play with their problem areas a little bit, experiment with kind of what they're thinking in terms of ways they want to approach it, experimenting with the kinds of data that they want to be collecting. And I know this connects to a question that came up earlier in the chat, which is kind of what are your expectations around kind of measuring outcomes and evidence. And I just want to emphasize, we really will be looking for the 5 collaborative teams that we're selecting to be defining for themselves what their measures of success are. And then Nourish will be supporting that with our evaluation capacity, which is twofold. It's a broad developmental evaluation approach, and then also a more specific impact evaluation that's looking at what the specific outcomes are of the work. I am getting the signal to move along, but Robin, did you want to answer? Was there anything else that you wanted to respond to, or should we just continue?
I think we can continue. And just to say, I've been trying to answer some questions as well by chat. So if you asked something earlier, check back there. But no, I think that's probably good for now, Hayley.
Okay, wonderful. Then let's go over to Mair to speak to us a little bit about the application process itself.
Thanks, Hayley. So as Robin mentioned earlier, there is a 2-step application process to apply for the Anchor Collaborative Cohort. So there is an expression of interest and a full application. So if you look at the blue area on this slide, you'll see there's planning grants that are available at request to support developing a full application when you submit your EOI during the first 2 intake dates, which Hayley spoke a lot to in the questions. So those were good questions. So being January 27th or February the 24th. You don't have to request a planning grant in order to submit an EOI during any of those 3 dates that are listed in the blue. And we plan to give feedback back on all the EOIs that are received. And it's meant to help you strengthen your full application should you decide to submit. And if you look on the orange, the full applications are due April 27th. So if you are planning to submit an EOI, the process is through the McConnell Foundation's online granting portal called Flux. There's a step-by-step guidance on how to use Flux on our Nourish website under Submit and Expression of Interest. And it's also linked in the recruitment package that we're going to circulate after this webinar, and that is also on our website. A couple of things that we wanted to flag to be aware of with Flux is the first thing is only one person can enter into the platform at a time. So this should be the lead health organization. And then the second thing we wanted to flag is that it can take 1 or 2 business days for accounts to be activated on Flux. So before you can complete your application, you should apply and sign up a couple days before. And if you're having any troubles or questions at all with Flux, you can email Robin or I. So developing your expression of interest, because there's only one partner that can submit an EOI through Flux, we've developed a Google document that can support collaborating on developing your responses. So this worksheet will allow you to share your ideas with your emerging team in preparation for submitting your EOI. So we want to make sure that people can contribute and have an opportunity for their voices to be heard. So this worksheet can help you through, and you can collaborate together on what your solutions will look like together. So in the expression of interest, we're going to be looking for things like food related challenges and opportunities your community faces with regards to Nourish 3 impact areas that Jen went through earlier. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that for now. And then over to the key dates. Sorry about that. Again, here are the key dates, and we really want you to focus in on the first date, which is January 27th, which is the first date for the EOI. And Robin and I are available to meet and chat with you if there are any questions, again, for any EOI questions. So miigwech.
Great, thanks, Mair. So we're nearing the end of our webinar. We've got about 9 minutes left and we are going to end on time. So we just wanted to share with you, we've mentioned a few times throughout the call that there's a recruitment package coming that's up on our website, and I'll post the link into the chat now as well. But really everything we've talked about today is covered in that, and it also has a lot of kind of practical information about who should be on your team and timelines and worksheets as well to help you think through engaging with a wide mix of stakeholders and understanding your readiness for the program. So there's lots of really helpful resources in there. So we do really encourage you to check that out and share it around as part of, the first step in thinking through, is this something that you could imagine yourself being a part of, and who might go through this journey with you. So I'll post that link in now, but it's really just a prompt to say that if you do have any lingering questions after today, there's a lot of info in there for you to look at. And I think we're going to move on to just a last couple of minutes for a few questions. And I'm just going to rescan the chat, Hayley, and see if I can pull out any that haven't been answered. So maybe give me 1 sec to do that.
Sure. Use it as a moment too, folks. If you want to add any last questions to the chat, go for it. We are going to be inviting, when we close the webinar, just before 1:30, we'll be inviting folks who want to stay on if they have any kind of last questions. We'll have like a virtual lounge where our team will be there for another half an hour or so to answer any questions that might be coming up. So get your questions in the chat so that they can be answered there, or get into the Q&A as well. Do you have a question? Any questions coming up, Robin?
So I think there was a question that I answered in the chat. Gabriel, I think you asked about clarifying how the groups are formed. So you were wondering if we match you or if you choose your group, and when you need to have the group established by. So we really see, this recruitment phase is quite long, and a big part of that is helping you to convene the right mix of stakeholders within your team. So we're not going to be matching you. That's something that we would be looking for you to identify locally. Though I would say, if you're looking to partner with others in your region and you don't have a good sense of who is on today's webinar, for instance, that might be interested, through the feedback survey at the end of the webinar that you'll be directed to, if you can share your information in that, then we can definitely try to connect you with other people in your area so that you can start to have conversations about what you might explore together. But in terms of submitting your expression of interest, we're just looking for those 2 primary partners to start. So the healthcare organization and the one main community partner. So at the EOI stage, which is kind of January, February time, you only need to have those 2 identified. And then over the course of March and April, as you prepare to submit your full application, we'll be supporting you to engage with a wider group of stakeholders. And that would include people from within your health organization and that community partner organization, as well as beyond those walls. But yeah, so it's not meant to be a prescriptive program in that sense, because we really feel like you in your local place will have the best sense of who the key players are, where relationships exist, where you see opportunity to strengthen relationships, create new networks and connections. So we would kind of have like a coaching and facilitated conversation about that with you to help you think it through, but looking for you to draw on your own expertise and knowledge about that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Wonderful. Anything else?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment. Just a couple of comments. So I think we can keep going.
Okay, great. Let's leave it there then. So as the last thing, I would invite you, we had hoped that you would be able to see each other's names in the chat clearly, but you've probably been seeing names of people you recognize pop up in the chat. use the chat to make any connections. We see some people doing that. That's wonderful. As we prepare to close, I want to point you to one resource that might be really helpful for those of you who are really trying to think, what can this look like in practice? We've obviously gone through some examples. We'll share them with you back when we share the slide deck and the recording. But I encourage you to look at this new series of transition practice studies that we published also in our last newsletter. It follows the journeys of 3 of the last innovators in the past cohort in Montreal, Sioux Lookout, and in Thunder Bay. They're really powerful stories that animate the Food for Health levers and that give you a flavor of what an organization setting down the path of anchor leadership looks like. None of the work in these case studies is done. All of these innovators and their organizations are continuing to do this work, but it shows you kind of the points of departure and what's possible when you take a systems approach to the work that's there. So those are available on our website for you to see. So for next steps, there are a few things. We love share any questions you want in the FAQ. We'll be sticking around for a virtual lounge after this. You're going to get a recruitment survey from us. That's going to be a really helpful way for us to get a sense of where you're at and what your needs are. Nourish's cohort programs are designed with responsive programming that really reflect the needs of the healthcare and community organizations that are applying. So it's helpful for us to see where you're at, what you're looking for, including the option of getting some matchmaking support to be connected with other folks in your region. And we will be sharing with you also the slides and recording of this presentation along with the recruitment package that Robin was just discussing. And you can stay tuned in those correspondences for the capacity building webinars that are going to be coming up starting in January, as well as some other Easter eggs things for us, maybe, you know, Kwanzaa Christmas gifts that are going to be coming up. So stay tuned there. We're really looking forward over the next 6 months to meet, engage, exchange with many of you as this work and the journey continues. And so for today, that's it for us. I want to say a big hawa to Jenny, Nyawen, to Kelly. Thank you to Andrew for coming on and sharing with us today. That's a big wholehearted thanks from Jen, Mair, and I. And then I also want to thank the last innovator cohort for paving the way on this work, and to all of you who have been doing this work over the past few years and who are looking to continue it too, as we continue to look for ways to unlock the full power of food for patient and planetary health. So thanks for joining us today. We hope you stay safe and stay well, and we look forward to exchanging through that survey and in any other follow-up that you want to do with us. So take care.